It was supposed to be the perfect wedding day at St. Augustine Chapel. Sarah Reynolds stood radiant in her white dress, surrounded by friends and family. Nobody saw the warning signs. Nobody expected what Marcus would do next. In front of 200 horrified guests, he struck her once, twice, 3 times. The chapel fell silent. Then came the sound that changed everything, a gun being cocked. A stranger stepped forward from the back pew, his weathered hands steady on his revolver. They called him Jackson Cole, a drifter with no past but an iron-clad sense of right and wrong. This is the story of how one man's intervention exposed years of hidden abuse and shook a whole town to its core. But here's what everyone still wonders. Why did Jackson really show up at that chapel that day? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun painted golden streaks across Sarah Reynolds' childhood bedroom as she stood before the full-length mirror, her mother's wedding dress flowing like liquid silk against her skin. In the soft morning light, the vintage lace caught every beam, creating patterns that danced across the walls, the same patterns that had enchanted her as a little girl watching her mother carefully preserve the gown in tissue paper each year. "Something borrowed, something blue," her mother Catherine whispered, carefully pinning a sapphire brooch to the dress's delicate bodice. Their eyes met in the mirror, and for a moment Sarah caught something in her mother's gaze, a flicker of worry that vanished as quickly as it appeared. "Mom." Sarah's voice wavered slightly. Catherine's hands stilled on the brooch. "Just remembering my own wedding day," she said, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Though I don't think your father's hands shook as much as Marcus's did." At the rehearsal dinner, Sarah's stomach tightened at the memory of last night. Marcus's white-knuckled grip on his wine glass, the way his laugh had taken on that sharp edge when her father made the toast. But she pushed the thought away, just as she'd pushed away all the little moments that had made her pause over the past year. The bedroom door creaked open, and her bridesmaids burst in with mimosas and excitement. Jenny, her maid of honor since their playground days, immediately sensed the tension. "Everything okay?" she asked, setting down the champagne flutes. "Perfect," Sarah answered too quickly, reaching for a glass. The bubbles tickled her nose, but the sweetness tasted artificial somehow. Jenny shared a look with Catherine, and Sarah pretended not to notice. She'd become good at that, pretending not to notice things. Like the way Marcus had accidentally deleted most of her male contacts from her phone, or how he'd suggested she quit her job at the law firm because a wife should focus on building a home. "Your father's heading to the church early," Catherine said, smoothing invisible wrinkles from the dress. "Marcus wanted to discuss some last-minute details about the ceremony." Sarah's hand trembled slightly, champagne threatening to spill. "What details?" "We agreed on everything weeks ago." "Oh, you know Marcus," Jenny tried to sound light, "always making sure everything's perfect. For you." Perfect. The word echoed in Sarah's mind. Perfect. Like the bruise she'd found on her wrist last month, perfectly hidden under her watch. Perfect. Like the way Marcus had apologized, perfectly sincere, perfectly devastated by his own actions. Perfect like the engagement ring that sometimes felt more like a shackle than a promise. The dress suddenly felt tight, the lace collar constrictive. Sarah set down her glass and moved to the window, needing air. Outside, spring had painted the small town of Mill Creek in shades of renewal, fresh grass, blooming dogwoods, the promise of new beginnings. Her mother's garden, where she'd played as a child, where Marcus had proposed, spread out below. "Sarah, honey," Catherine's voice was gentle, "if there's anything you want to talk about." "I'm fine, Mom." The words came automatically now, rehearsed as carefully as her vows. "Just wedding day jitters." Jenny approached with the veil, another family heirloom, delicate as cobwebs. As she carefully arranged it in Sarah's hair, their eyes met in the mirror. For a moment, Sarah thought she saw her own doubts reflected in her best friend's face. "You know you can tell us anything, right?" Jenny whispered, low enough that only Sarah could hear. Sarah's throat tightened. There were so many things she could say. About the constant texts checking her whereabouts. About the jokes that cut just a little too deep. About the way Marcus's hand had gripped her arm last week when the waiter smiled at her too long. But the invitations had been sent. The guests were arriving. Her father had spent a small fortune on this wedding. And Marcus loved her. He'd said so last night, tears in his eyes as he apologized for his stress at the rehearsal dinner. He'd promised it would be different after they were married. Everything would be perfect. The morning light caught her mother's sapphire brooch, sending blue shadows dancing across the white dress. Sarah touched it gently, remembering all the stories of strong women in her family who had worn it before her. Women who had endured, persevered, survived. "We should start doing makeup," she said finally, turning away from her reflection. "We don't want to be late." The dress swished softly as she moved, the sound like whispered warnings that no one would hear until it was almost too late. Marcus Davidson stood before his own reflection in the church's private chamber, adjusting his bow tie with meticulous precision. Everything had to be perfect. The platinum ring in his pocket, his grandfather's, with its newly added inscription, pressed against his thigh like a reminder of his legacy. "Mine forever," the hidden words declared, etched where only he and Sarah would ever see them. "Looking sharp, son," Richard Davidson said from the doorway. Mill Creek's most prominent real estate developer cast an imposing figure even at 65. His silver hair and tailored suit a testament to old money and older influence. "Everything set with James?" Marcus asked, referring to the minister. "Change the vows like you asked. No more of that equal partnership nonsense. Traditional, all the way." Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Just like we discussed." Marcus nodded, satisfaction warming his chest. Sarah had been disappointed about the last-minute change, but he'd explained how important tradition was to his family. She'd understood. She always did, eventually. The door opened again, admitting Judge Harrison, who'd known Marcus since his first year clerking at the courthouse. "The guests are arriving. Half the town's judiciary is out there." As expected, Marcus smoothed his already perfect hair. "Sarah's family might not have our connections, but they'll learn. After today, she'll be a Davidson." He turned back to the mirror, remembering the first time he'd seen Sarah in court, defending some pro bono case about domestic violence. So passionate, so fierce. He'd known then she needed to be tamed, shaped, molded into the perfect wife. The process hadn't always been smooth, but she was learning. "About last night," Judge Harrison cleared his throat. "At the rehearsal dinner, people were talking. A minor disagreement." Marcus cut him off. "Pre-wedding stress. You know how emotional women can be." The men shared knowing looks, the kind that had smoothed over countless minor disagreements in Marcus's past. The same looks that had made parking tickets, noise complaints, and one particularly unfortunate restraining order attempt disappear. Marcus fingered the ring again, remembering Sarah's face when he'd first presented it. She'd been so touched by the family history, never thinking to look closer, to see the possessive inscription that would mark her as his property. "The Robertson girl is here," Richard mentioned casually. "Your former client." Marcus's jaw tightened. Amanda Robertson, his first attempt at finding the perfect wife, before she'd proven too resistant to guidance. "She wouldn't dare make a scene." "Already handled," Judge Harrison assured him. Reminded her about the NDA and her father's upcoming parole hearing. A knock at the door interrupted them. David Chen, Marcus's best man and fellow attorney, entered with a flask. Traditional courage. Marcus accepted it, taking a long pull. The whiskey burned, but not as much as the memory of Sarah's defiance last week. That moment in the restaurant when she'd laughed at the waiter's joke, drawing attention to herself. He'd corrected her later, of course, gently, always gently, leaving no marks where anyone could see. "I hear her father's been asking questions," David mentioned too casually, "about the firm's finances." Let him. Marcus straightened his cufflinks. Platinum like the ring. After today, what's mine is Sarah's, and what's Sarah's? He smiled, a sharp thing in the mirror's reflection. Well, we know how community property laws work, don't we? The men laughed, the sound bouncing off wood-paneled walls that had witnessed generations of such arrangements. Marcus checked his watch, the same model his father had worn when teaching him that a Davidson man's word was law in his own home. Almost time, Richard clapped his son's shoulder. You've chosen well this time. Sarah's malleable, with the right pressure. Marcus nodded, thinking of the careful groundwork he'd laid, the subtle isolation, the gentle undermining, the calculated displays of power wrapped in concern. Sarah was nearly perfect now. Just a few rough edges left to smooth. The ring weighed heavy in his pocket as he followed the others toward the chapel. In less than an hour, Sarah would be his, bound by law and tradition and the weight of his family's influence. No more independence, no more pro bono cases championing lost causes, no more defiance. The thought pleased him as he took his place. At the altar, watching the doors where his bride would soon appear, everything was falling into place, everything would be perfect. He had made sure of it. The roadside inn on the outskirts of Mill Creek had seen better days, but it suited Jackson Cole's needs. Anonymity came cheap in places like this, where the night clerk barely glanced up from his phone as Jackson paid cash for the room. Inside the sparse bedroom, he placed his worn leather journal on the scratched bedside table. The book's pages had grown thick with newspaper clippings, photographs, and handwritten notes, a chronicle of similar stories in similar towns. He opened it to a fresh page and added today's date, followed by 2 words, Sarah Reynolds, his. Burner phone buzzed. The number was unlisted, just like always. You're in position? A woman's voice asked without preamble. Yes? Jackson's reply was equally brief. He fingered the corner of a newspaper clipping about Amanda Robertson's accident 2 years ago. The ceremony starts at 2. Marcus Davidson has friends in high places. They always do. Jackson's weathered hands traced the journal's spine, where other names were written, each representing a life shattered by men who thought power meant ownership. This one's different, the voice insisted. His family practically owns the town. Law enforcement, judiciary. I know. I've been watching. He'd spent the past week learning Mill Creek's rhythms, noting which cops frequented the country club, which judges played golf with Richard Davidson. Through the thin walls, he could hear a couple arguing next door. The man's voice grew louder, and Jackson's hand instinctively moved toward his revolver before the sound subsided. Amanda Robertson reached out again. The voice on the phone continued. Says she's willing to talk this time? Jackson opened the journal to a dog-eared page from 2 years ago. Amanda's bruised face stared back from a hospital photograph that had never made it into official records. Too late for court, he said. Statute of limitations. But not too late for the truth. He turned to his latest notes on Marcus Davidson. Complaints buried, witnesses pressured, evidence misplaced. A familiar pattern drawn in familiar ink. The girl at the diner, Jackson said. The one with the long sleeves in summer heat. She worked for him, his first secretary, moved across state lines after her resignation. Jackson added another name to his growing list. The journal had become a ledger of sorts, not of debts paid, but of justice delayed. Each entry represented a woman who'd faced men like Marcus. Davidson men who thought money and influence made them untouchable. Standing, he moved to the window. St. Augustine Chapel rose in the distance, its spire piercing a sky heavy with approaching storm clouds. The weather forecast had promised sun for the wedding. You're not just there to watch this time, are you? The voice held a note of concern. Jackson checked his revolver, not the modern automatic preferred by professionals, but an old Colt. .45. The kind his father had carried when he'd taught Jackson that a man's duty was to protect, never to harm. You know what he'll do to her, the voice pressed, what he's already doing. I know. The journal's pages rustled as a breeze swept through the open window. Pages filled with similar stories, similar warnings ignored until it was too late. Lightning flickered in the distance. In the parking lot below, a dark sedan with government plates pulled in, Judge Harrison's car. The judge stepped out, phone to his ear, speaking rapidly. Even from above, Jackson recognized the gestures of damage control. "Just," the voice hesitated, "be careful. These types of men, I know what type of man Marcus Davidson is." Jackson's tone was quiet but carried the weight of too many similar confrontations. "I know what he'll do to her, what he'll keep doing, while good people look the other way." He closed the journal, but not before adding one final note beneath Sarah's name. "Last warning. The network's on standby," the voice said. "If you need extraction, I won't." Jackson tucked the revolver into its holster. Not this time. The line went dead. Through the window, he watched Judge Harrison hurry into the motel office, likely ensuring no one remembered the quiet man who'd checked in with cash and no questions asked. Jackson picked up the journal one last time, touching the worn leather like a talisman. Inside, generations of similar stories waited. Some ended in tragedy, others in escape. Today's would end differently. The storm clouds gathered over St. Augustine Chapel as Jackson Cole prepared for a wedding where he hadn't been invited but knew he had to attend. Some promises had to be kept, even if they were never spoken aloud. The wedding programs lay in neat stacks by St. Augustine Chapel's entranceway, cream-colored paper embossed with gold lettering. "Marcus Davidson and Sarah Reynolds request the honor of your presence." Each one listed Marcus's charitable works. Beneath the ceremony details, founder of the Davidson Family Foundation, chairman of the Children's Hospital Board, donor to the county's domestic violence shelter. A perfect man on perfect paper. Jenny stopped herself from crumpling the program in her hands as she peeked through the chapel doors. The guests were filing in, Mill Creek's finest in their Sunday best, all here to witness what the society pages had dubbed the wedding of the year. "Everything okay?" Catherine Reynolds appeared beside her, tension visible beneath her mother-of-the-bride smile. "Just checking the timing," Jenny lied, watching Judge Harrison escort his wife to a front pew. The judge's eyes kept darting to the side entrance where Marcus had disappeared earlier. Behind them, in the bridal chamber, Sarah sat motionless before a gilt-edged mirror. Her mother's dress caught the light from stained glass windows, throwing colored shadows across her pale face. 5 minutes, the wedding coordinator announced, poking her head in. "Is everyone ready?" Sarah's hand went to her wrist, where the watch covered fresh bruises. "I just need a moment." The coordinator frowned at her clipboard. "Mr. Davidson was very specific about the timing. She said she needs a moment." Jenny's voice was sharp, enough to make the coordinator step back. As the door closed, Catherine knelt beside her daughter. "Sarah, honey." "I'm fine, Mom." Sarah's voice was distant, rehearsed. "Everything's fine." Through the walls, they could hear the string quartet, beginning the prelude. Each note seemed to draw the air tighter, like a bow being pulled back. In the main chapel, Jackson Cole slipped quietly into the last pew. His journal was back in the motel, but he'd memorized every detail. Marcus's patterns, the exits, the 12 seconds it would take to reach the altar from his position. The programs caught his eye, specifically Marcus's charitable works. Jackson had traced the money, found the truth behind each donation. The domestic violence shelter's new wing, paid for with funds embezzled from the Davidson Family Foundation. A perfect cover, buying silence with stolen charity. The music shifted, signaling the ceremony's start. Marcus appeared at the altar, every inch the proud groom in his tailored tuxedo. Only Jackson noticed how his right hand kept clenching and unclenching, the same motion noted in Amanda Robertson's testimony about the night she'd fallen down the stairs. As the bridesmaids began their procession, Jenny made one last attempt. "Sarah, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do." Sarah stood, smoothing the vintage dress. "Everyone's here. Daddy spent so much, and Marcus, he promised—" "Promises don't erase bruises," Jenny whispered, but Sarah was already moving toward the door, where her father waited. The chapel fell quiet as the bridal march began. 200 guests rose, turning to watch Sarah Reynolds take her last walk as a single woman. Her father's arm trembled slightly beneath her hand. From his position, Jackson could see Marcus's face change as Sarah approached. Something possessive flashed in his eyes, there and gone like lightning before a storm. The same look Jackson had seen too many times in too many places. The programs rustled like dying leaves as the guests sat. Sarah's father placed her hand in Marcus's, hesitating a fraction too long before letting go. Up close, Marcus's smile showed too many teeth. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, his voice echoing off ancient stone walls that had witnessed countless vows, but how many had been made in fear rather than love? Sarah's voice shook slightly as she repeated the traditional words. Marcus's grip on her hands tightened with each tremor, his knuckles whitening. In the front pew, Judge Harrison shifted uncomfortably. Jackson's hand moved closer to his concealed revolver. Not yet, but soon. The signs were there, building like pressure in a sealed container. Marcus's breathing had quickened, his jaw clenching. As Sarah stumbled over honor and obey, the minister turned to Marcus, beginning his portion of the vows. The changed version, Jackson noted. No equality, no partnership, just possession dressed in ceremony. Marcus's voice rang out, clear and confident. "I take you, Sarah, to be my wife." In the third row, Amanda Robertson wrapped her arms around herself, memories making her shiver despite the warm spring air. Jenny's fingers twisted the program into knots. Catherine Reynolds closed her eyes in silent prayer. And in the last pew, Jackson Cole counted the seconds, watching Marcus Davidson's mask begin to slip, knowing that some storms couldn't be stopped, only weathered and survived. The moment hung suspended like a held breath. The photographer raised his camera, ready to capture the exchanging of rings. On a small table near the altar, an ornate silver frame waited to hold the first photo of the newly married couple. A gift from Marcus's parents, engraved with "Forever begins today." Then Sarah's hands began to shake. The ring, Marcus's grandfather's ring with its secret inscription, slipped from her trembling fingers. It hit the hardwood floor with a sound like a bell tolling, rolling to a stop near Amanda Robertson's feet. The chapel went silent. Marcus's face transformed, public mask crumbling like ancient plaster. Those in the front rows would later describe how his eyes changed, turning flat and cold as winter ice. "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered, reaching for the ring. "I'm so—" The first blow caught her across the face, snapping her head back. The sound of Marcus's hand meeting flesh echoed off stone walls that had witnessed 2 centuries of weddings, but never this. Someone screamed. Sarah stumbled backward, her mother's vintage dress catching on the altar steps. Marcus followed, all pretense gone. "Clumsy bitch," he snarled, grabbing her arm. "You embarrass me in front of everyone." The second blow drew blood from her lip. The third never landed. "That's enough." Jackson Cole's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. The photographer's camera flashed once, capturing the moment in stark relief. Sarah fallen against the altar, blood staining her white dress. Marcus with his hand raised, and Jackson Cole rising from the last pew, his revolver drawn and steady. Judge Harrison stood, face mottled with rage. "Security! Someone call—" "Sit down." Jackson's tone made it clear this wasn't a request. "Unless you want to explain why you buried Amanda Robertson's police report." Amanda's gasp was audible in the stunned silence. Her husband gripped her arm, but she pulled free, standing despite his attempts to force her back down. Marcus released Sarah, turning to face Jackson. "You have no right." "Like you had no right to put 3 women in the hospital?" Jackson's aim didn't waver. "Or was that their fault too?" The silver frame crashed to the floor as Sarah scrambled. Away from Marcus. The glass shattered, spiderwebbing like the cracks in Marcus's carefully constructed facade. "Sarah," Marcus's voice turned cajoling, reasonable. "Baby, I'm sorry. You know how I get when I'm stressed." If you hadn't dropped. Don't. The word came from Sarah's split lip, soft but clear. She touched her face, looking at the blood on her fingers, as if seeing the truth for the first time. Don't you dare. Catherine Reynolds ran to her daughter, helping her up. Jenny was already on the phone with 911, her voice shaking but determined. You can't prove anything, Marcus sneered, but his eyes kept darting to the exit. Your father can't bury this. Jackson nodded toward the photographer, who was still capturing every moment. Not this time. More women were standing. Now, a former secretary, a junior partner from Marcus's firm, each one holding their phones, recording, finally breaking years of enforced silence. Marcus lunged, not for Jackson, but for Sarah. His fingers caught her veil, tearing it from her hair. You're my wife, you belong... The click of Jackson's revolver, freezing him mid-reach. She belongs to herself. Through the stained glass windows, red and blue lights began to flash. Not the corrupt local police this time, state troopers, summoned by an anonymous tip about potential violence at a high-profile wedding. The shattered frame lay between Marcus and Sarah, its engraved message now seeming more threat than promise. In its broken glass, their reflections fractured and multiplied, the abuser, the survivor, and the stranger who'd finally said enough. It's over, Sarah whispered, steel entering her voice. We're over. Marcus's mask slipped completely, revealing the monster beneath. He spat words like venom, threats, and promises of revenge. But his power was broken, scattered like the shards of glass at his feet. As the state troopers entered, Jackson lowered his revolver. His part was done. Sarah Reynolds stood on her own now, straight-backed, despite her torn dress and bruised face, surrounded by other women who'd found their voices at last. The photographer's final shot captured it all. A bride's blood on white lace, a silver frame's broken promises, and the moment a legacy of abuse shattered against the strength of those who refused to stay silent any longer. State Trooper Lisa Martinez sat across from Sarah in the hospital examination room, her body camera recording every detail. The preliminary police report lay open on her lap, its crisp pages a stark contrast to the crumpled wedding dress now sealed in an evidence bag. Take your time, Martinez said softly, watching Sarah wince as the nurse photographed her injuries. Start from the beginning. Sarah touched her split lip, her engagement ring conspicuously absent. Which beginning? Today or the first time? Her voice caught. All of it, Martinez replied, pen ready. Every incident you remember. In the waiting room, Catherine Reynolds clutched a stack of papers. Copies of reports she'd found hidden in Sarah's desk at home, dating back months, each incident carefully documented. Photographs of bruises, dates, times, witnesses who'd looked away. Jenny paced nearby, her bridesmaid's dress still spattered with Sarah's blood. I should have said something sooner, done something. You're doing something now. Jackson Cole spoke from his position by the door, where two other troopers kept watch. His revolver had been confiscated, but they'd allowed him to stay after Sarah's insistence. Through the hospital windows, they could see news vans gathering. Mill Creek's biggest story in decades was breaking, and with it, years of carefully maintained secrets. Inside the examination room, Sarah's voice grew stronger as she spoke. The first time was 3 months after we got engaged. I'd stayed late at work, defending a domestic violence case. He said I was choosing strangers over him. Martinez wrote everything down, her experienced hand capturing details that painted a familiar pattern. And the local police? Judge Harrison handled it personally. Sarah's laugh held. No humor. Said it would be better to keep things within the family. The nurse cataloguing Sarah's injuries paused at her wrist, noting old fractures that had healed wrong. These should have been treated. Marcus said a hospital visit would hurt his reputation. Sarah stared at her hands. He always said that, after each time. Down the hall, Amanda Robertson was giving her own statement to another trooper. Her Voice carried, describing the night 2 years ago when she'd fallen down the stairs at the Davidson estate. More women waited their turn, years of enforced silence finally breaking. Richard Davidson arrived with a team of lawyers, demanding to see his son. Trooper Martinez met them in the hallway. "Your son is being processed downtown," she stated flatly. "And before you mention Judge Harrison, you should know he's already agreed to cooperate with the state investigation." Investigation. Richard's face purpled. "This is a private family matter." "This is aggravated assault," Martinez cut him off, holding up the growing police report. "With witnesses, and based on the statements we're gathering, it's part of a pattern." The lawyers shifted uncomfortably as more details emerged. The Davidson Family Foundation's missing funds, the buried police reports, the witnesses who'd been paid or threatened into silence. In the examination room, Sarah continued her statement. Each incident was noted with clinical precision: dates, times, injuries, witnesses, a record of escalating violence hidden behind wealth and influence. "The wedding," Martinez prompted gently. "What made today different?" Sarah looked through the door's window where Jackson Cole stood guard. "Someone finally stood up. Made me realize I could too." The hospital intercom crackled with announcements, but beneath them came the sound of more police radios. The State Attorney General's office had taken interest. This wouldn't be handled quietly anymore. Jenny entered with fresh clothes for Sarah, her face set with determination. "Channel 5 wants an interview. So does the Tribune." "No," Sarah said, surprising them. "Not yet. First, we need to get the other women's stories. All of them." Martinez nodded approvingly, adding another note to the report. This wasn't just one incident anymore. It was becoming something larger, a reckoning long overdue. Jackson Cole finally spoke from the doorway. "There's a network. People who help women escape men like Marcus. When you're ready." "I'm ready now," Sarah said, her voice stronger than it had been in months. "But not to run, to fight." The police. Report grew thicker with each passing hour. More women came forward, more evidence emerged. The carefully constructed wall of silence around the Davidson family began to crumble, one testimony at a time. Outside, the evening news led with the story, "Prominent attorney arrested after wedding day assault." But the real story was in Martinez's report, not just of one woman's escape, but of a system of abuse and protection finally exposed to the light. Sarah Reynolds, still in her torn wedding dress, had shattered more than just her silence. She'd broken the chain of power that had protected men like Marcus Davidson for generations, and in doing so, she'd given others the courage to speak their own truths. Detective Karen Chen, from the State Bureau's Digital Forensics Unit, stared at her monitor, scrolling through the contents of Marcus Davidson's unlocked phone. His fingerprint had been required by court order, revealing years of carefully hidden communications. "How bad?" Trooper Martinez asked, leaning over her shoulder. "Worse than we thought." Chen pointed to a series of encrypted messages. "He kept everything, like trophies." The phone contained hundreds of threatening texts to past victims, photos of injuries he'd inflicted, conversations with Judge Harrison about handling complaints, a digital trail of systematic abuse and corruption. "Look at this thread with his father." Chen opened a message chain. They discussed Sarah's training like she was property. Richard Davidson gave him advice on how to break her spirit. In the conference room next door, Sarah sat with state prosecutors, her face pale but composed as she reviewed transcripts. Jenny hadn't left her side since the hospital and now clutched her hand as they read Marcus's words. "He planned it all," Sarah whispered, recognizing dates and incidents. The isolation, the gaslighting, even the timing of the violence, it was all calculated. The phone revealed a pattern spanning years. Each relationship followed the same progression: charm, control, violence, silence. Marcus had refined his technique with each victim, learning from his father's generation how to abuse with impunity. Amanda Robertson entered the conference room, still shaking from giving her statement. They found my old texts, the ones the police lost when I tried to press charges. Sarah reached for her hand. You're not alone anymore. None of us are. The phone's contents had triggered a broader investigation. The Davidson family's influence was unraveling, exposing decades of covered-up crimes. Other powerful men in Mill Creek grew nervous, wondering what secrets Marcus's phone might reveal about them. Jackson Cole watched from the corner, his presence requested by Sarah. His network had already identified 3 other women who'd escaped the Davidsons' orbit, now living under assumed names. The Foundation's finances, a federal investigator, announced, entering with fresh documents. Marcus used charity funds to pay off victims. His father authorized the transfers. The phone contained spreadsheets tracking every payment, every threat, every person whose silence had been bought or coerced. Marcus's arrogance in keeping such detailed records would be his undoing. He never thought he'd be caught, Sarah said, reading another transcript. None of them did. They thought their power made them untouchable. Detective Chen found more. Videos of Marcus bragging to friends about putting women in their place. Audio of Judge Harrison promising to bury evidence. A detailed plan for isolating Sarah after the wedding, including strategies for cutting her off from legal practice. My whole life, Sarah realized, he was planning to erase my whole life. But the phone revealed something else, something that made even hardened investigators pause. Marcus had been grooming his next victim, a young intern at his firm. The wedding hadn't been an end goal, but just another step in a pattern that would have continued. We need to warn her, Sarah insisted, lawyer's instincts kicking in, and any others he was targeting. The investigation expanded hourly. Marcus's phone connected to other powerful men, other covered-up crimes. Mill Creek's edifice of corruption began to crack, revealing rot at its foundation. He kept a ranking system, Chen noted with disgust, opening another file, rating women on how easily they could be controlled. Sarah, you were his greatest challenge yet. Sarah laughed darkly. He was right about that at least. The phone's contents would be enough to ensure Marcus never hurt another woman. But Sarah and the others knew their fight wasn't just against one man, but against the system that had protected him. Jackson Cole received a message from his network. 3. More women were ready to come forward, inspired by Sarah's stand. The wall of silence was crumbling, one voice at a time. What happens now? Jenny asked, watching Sarah digest another revelation from the phone's dark archive. Sarah stood, strength returning to her stance. Now, we make sure everyone sees the truth. Not just about Marcus, but about all of them. No more secrets, no more silence. The phone lay on the conference table, its screen still scrolling through years of documented abuse. But its power to intimidate was broken, transformed into evidence of crimes that could no longer be hidden. Mill Creek would never be the same. And Sarah Reynolds, who had walked into her wedding as a victim, was emerging as something else entirely. A catalyst for change that was long overdue. 1 week after the wedding that never was, a simple flyer appeared on Mill Creek's community boards. "Survivors supporting survivors," it read. "You are not alone. You will be believed." The meeting location was the Women's Center across town, far from the Davidson family's sphere of influence. Sarah sat in the back of the meeting room, watching women filter in. Some she recognized from Marcus's phone records. Others were strangers, drawn by whispered word of mouth. Each carried the same wary look she'd seen in her own mirror for too long. "I wasn't sure anyone would come," Jenny whispered, arranging chairs in a circle. But they did come, first in ones and twos, then in groups. Amanda Robertson arrived with her sister. A former Davidson Foundation employee brought her daughter. Women from other wealthy families carrying secrets as heavy as Sarah's had been. "My name is Sarah," she began when the room was full, "and a week ago I thought I was alone. The flyer had spread beyond Mill Creek, shared in secret Facebook groups and texted between friends. Women from neighboring towns arrived, each with their own stories of powerful men and silenced voices. Jackson Cole stood guard outside, his network ensuring no one could intimidate these women again. Inside, Sarah listened as stories poured out, some for the first time. "He said no one would believe me," a young lawyer shared, "that his family had too much influence. Mine threatened my children's future," another added, "said we'd never work in this state again." The flyer had caught the attention of domestic violence organizations statewide. Resources began flowing in: legal aid, counseling, emergency housing. Sarah's stand had cracked open a door that could no longer be closed. Amanda stood, hands shaking but voice steady. 2 years ago I thought I was crazy, that maybe I had deserved. She took a deep breath. But seeing Sarah at the wedding, seeing her fight back, I knew I had to speak up. The room hummed with shared understanding. These women had lived different lives, but their stories echoed, with familiar patterns of abuse and power. "The state investigation is ongoing," Sarah explained. "But this isn't just about legal justice. It's about reclaiming our voices, our power." A teenage girl raised her hand. "My boyfriend's family is like the Davidsons. They own half the town. How do I—" "You start by knowing you're not alone," Sarah said firmly. "We protect each other now." The flyer had made its way to the state attorney general's office. They'd assigned a special prosecutor to the Davidson case, one known for taking down powerful abusers. Jenny distributed resource packets, another thing Marcus's stolen charity funds would now actually support. "There's a secure contact number. Any time, day or night." Some women cried, others sat in stunned silence, realizing they weren't alone in their private hells. A few took photos of the flyer, promising to share it in their own communities. "My father's friends," one woman started. "They're like Marcus, the same entitlement, the same abuse of power. But after seeing what happened at your wedding—" "They're not untouchable," Sarah finished. "None of them are, not anymore." Outside, more women arrived, drawn by hope and desperate courage. Jackson's network had already helped 3 escape similar situations in neighboring counties. The flyer became more than paper and ink. It became a symbol of resistance, of solidarity, of change. Sarah kept a copy in her wallet, a reminder that breaking silence was only the beginning. "We meet every week," she told the group. "And keep meeting. Keep supporting each other, keep fighting." As the session ended, women lingered, exchanging numbers and sharing resources. The isolation that abusers relied on was breaking down, replaced by a network of support and strength. Sarah watched them leave in groups, ensuring no one walked out alone. The flyer had started something that couldn't be stopped, not by the Davidsons, not by any powerful family. "This is just the beginning," she told Jenny as they cleaned up. "There are more out there, more who need to know they're not alone." The flyer would keep spreading, keep reaching those trapped in silence. And Sarah Reynolds, who had walked into her wedding a victim, was helping others find the strength she'd discovered in herself, one survivor at a time. The courthouse steps swarmed with reporters as Sarah arrived for the preliminary hearing. Court documents tucked under her arm, she walked past cameras and microphones, Jenny and Jackson flanking her like guards. Inside, Marcus's legal team had filled the prosecution's desk with motions, attempts to suppress evidence, discredit witnesses, and paint the wedding day violence as an isolated incident fueled by wedding day stress. Motion to exclude evidence from defendant's personal bone, the first document read, obtained under duress and violation of privacy rights. Sarah watched Marcus enter in handcuffs, his prison jumpsuit a far cry from his wedding tuxedo. His father sat behind him, surrounded by the city's most expensive defense attorneys. Their strategy lay bare in the motions before them: attack the victims, protect the family, maintain control. "Your Honor," Marcus's lead attorney began, "we move to dismiss all charges. Mr. Davidson is a pillar of this community, and this unfortunate incident, The special prosecutor, Diana Chen, rose. She held up a thick folder of court documents. "We have evidence of systematic abuse spanning years, witness testimonies, financial records, documented threats." Marcus's mask slipped for a moment, rage flickering across his face before his attorneys could quiet him. Sarah recognized that look, the one that had always preceded his worst violence. "These women," his attorney continued, "many with questionable backgrounds, are clearly coordinating their stories for financial gain." "Objection!" Chen's voice cracked like a whip. "Victim blaming has no place in this courtroom." The judge, brought in from another district to ensure impartiality, studied the growing stack of documents. Evidence mounted: Marcus's threatening texts, surveillance footage from the Davidson estate, hospital records carefully buried by Judge Harrison. Furthermore, Marcus's attorney pressed, "Ms. Reynolds' own actions suggest premeditation. The presence of an armed individual at the wedding. You mean the man who stopped your client from continuing his assault?" Chen countered, producing police photographs of Sarah's injuries. "The same pattern of abuse documented in these reports?" The court documents told a story the Davidsons couldn't bury. Each motion to dismiss was met with evidence of witness tampering. Every attempt to discredit survivors was countered with documented patterns of abuse. Richard Davidson leaned forward, whispering urgently to his son's legal team. They produced another motion, this one threatening to expose Sarah's past cases, her client's confidential information. "Your Honor," Sarah stood, addressing the court directly, "I'd like to speak." The room fell silent. Marcus's smirk suggested he expected tears, pleas for leniency. He didn't know this version of Sarah, the one who'd emerged from the ashes of his violence. "These documents show more than one man's crimes," she said, voice steady. "They show a system that protected him, enabled him, a system that needs to change." She held up a final document. Marcus's own words from a recorded jail phone call. "They can't touch me. They never could. Women like her need to be taught their place." The judge's gavel cracked like thunder. "Bail denied. This case will proceed to trial." Marcus lunged forward, mask completely gone. "You bitch! You think you can—" His outburst, witnessed by the packed courtroom, only reinforced the truth contained in those documents. As bailiffs restrained him, Sarah stood her ground, unflinching. Outside, more survivors waited with their own stories, their own evidence. The Davidson family's influence was crumbling under the weight of truth finally exposed. "This isn't over," Richard Davidson threatened as they left. "No," Sarah agreed, patting the court documents that would ensure his son's downfall. "It's just beginning." The media captured every moment. Marcus's rage, Sarah's strength, the survivors standing united. No amount of legal maneuvering could hide the truth now. Jackson Cole watched from the back of the courtroom, noting familiar patterns. Men like Marcus always believed their power made them untouchable. The court documents proved otherwise. "Ready for what comes next?" Jenny asked, as they descended the courthouse steps. Sarah clutched the documents that would help free not just her, but countless others, ready to finish what they started. The truth, like justice, could no longer be buried under legal motions and powerful names. Sarah Reynolds had walked into court a survivor. She walked out a warrior, armed with evidence that would ensure Marcus Davidson never hurt another woman again. The courthouse artist's pencil moved swiftly across paper, capturing the electric tension of the courtroom. In her sketch, Marcus Davidson sat rigid in his defendant's chair, his expensive suit unable to hide the anger simmering beneath his surface. Beside him, his team of attorneys arranged papers like generals, plotting battle strategy. Across the aisle, Sarah Reynolds watched the jury file in. The artist's pencil caught her transformation. Gone was the beaten bride in bloodied white lace. In her place sat a warrior in a crisp navy suit, Jenny on one side, Amanda Robertson on the other. Behind them, rows of survivors filled the gallery, each face a testament to Marcus's hidden history of abuse. In the case of the state versus Marcus Davidson, Judge Elena Martinez began, her voice carrying to every corner of the packed courtroom. The artist's sketch captured her stern expression, so different from Judge Harrison's enabling smirk. Special Prosecutor Diana Chen rose for her opening statement. "This case is about power," she began, pacing before the jury. "The power to abuse, the power to silence, and finally, the power to speak truth." The artist's hand flew across the page, recording Marcus's face darkening as Chen outlined his crimes. Each sketch revealed more of his mask slipping, the wealthy philanthropist becoming the monster Sarah had known in private. "The evidence will show," Chen continued, "not just one incident of violence, but years of calculated abuse. Not just one victim silenced, but an entire system of corruption designed to protect men like Marcus Davidson." In the gallery, Richard Davidson shifted uncomfortably as Chen detailed the family's role in covering up his son's crimes. The artist captured his unease, the first cracks showing in the Davidson dynasty's facade. "The defendant believed his power made him untouchable," Chen's voice hardened. "That wealth and influence gave him the right to treat women as property, to beat them, control them, break them." Sarah felt Marcus's glare burning into her back, but she didn't turn. The artist's pencil traced her profile. Head high, shoulders straight, fear replaced by determination. The defense's opening statement was predictable: character assassination, wrapped in legal terminology. They painted Marcus as the real victim, targeted by women seeking fame and fortune, called Sarah mentally unstable, claimed she'd orchestrated the wedding day incident for attention. But their words fell flat as the artist's sketches were passed to the jury. Sarah's bruised face on her wedding day, Marcus's rage captured in harsh lines and darker shadows. No amount of legal maneuvering could erase those images. Jackson Cole sat in the back row, his presence a reminder of how close Marcus had come to doing worse. The artist included him in the corner of one sketch, a watchful guardian representing all those who'd finally stood up to say, "Enough." "The prosecution calls Sarah Reynolds," Chen announced. Sarah rose, feeling the weight of every survivor's eyes as she took the oath. The artist's pencil captured her moment of truth, one woman standing against generations of privileged abuse. "Ms. Reynolds," Chen began, "please tell us about the first time Marcus Davidson hit you." The courtroom fell silent as Sarah spoke. Her voice never wavered as she described the escalating violence, the isolation, the carefully constructed trap she'd nearly married into. The artist's sketches recorded every moment, Sarah's strength growing with each truth revealed. Marcus's attorneys objected repeatedly, trying to break her rhythm, but Sarah had found a power they couldn't touch. Each sketch showed her growing stronger as Marcus seemed to shrink, his illusion of control crumbling stroke by stroke. "And on your wedding day," Chen prompted, "what made you finally resist?" Sarah looked directly at Marcus for the first time. "I saw myself through new eyes, not as his possession, but as a human being who deserved better, who deserved justice." The artist's final sketch of the day captured the essence of the trial, not just a legal proceeding, but a moment of transformation. Sarah standing tall, survivors united behind her. Marcus Davidson's power finally meeting its match. As the court adjourned, reporters clamored to copy the artist's sketches. These images would spread across the country, inspiring other survivors to break their silence. Each line drawn was another crack in the wall of privilege that had protected abusers for too long. Sarah touched the sketch of her testimony, seeing in those simple lines the story of her journey from victim to victor. The truth, like justice, could no longer be hidden in shadows. During a recess in the trial, Sarah found Jackson Cole sitting alone in the courthouse garden, holding a weathered newspaper clipping. The yellowed paper showed its age. 20 years of being carried, folded, and unfolded, a reminder of why he'd chosen this path. "My sister," he said without looking up, sensing Sarah's presence. Rebecca Cole, aged 24. The article's headline was still legible. Prominent CEO's wife dies in tragic accident. Below it, a young woman's smile radiated joy and hope, so similar to Sarah's own wedding photos. They ruled it an accident, Jackson continued, his weathered hands trembling slightly. Just like they always did back then. Her husband was too powerful, too connected. Sound familiar? Sarah sat beside him, reading the article. Rebecca Cole had fallen down the stairs in her Manhattan penthouse. Her husband, CEO James Whitmore, had been devastated by the tragic loss of his young wife. I was overseas with the military when it happened. Jackson's voice carried years of pain. By the time I got home, everything was buried. Evidence lost. Witnesses suddenly uncertain. Money and influence buying silence. The article mentioned Rebecca's clumsy nature and history of accidents. Classic victim blaming wrapped in respectful journalism. But a quoted neighbor had noticed something. She always wore long sleeves, even in summer. I started digging, Jackson said. Found others. Women who'd tried to report him, tried to get help. Each time the system protected him instead of them. Sarah noticed another clipping beneath the first, James Whitmore's obituary from 15 years ago. Heart attack while hiking, it claimed. Jackson's expression revealed nothing, but his eyes held dark satisfaction. After that, I couldn't go back to normal life. Started noticing patterns, men like Whitmore, like Marcus, the way they choose their victims, the way they use power to silence them. He unfolded another article, his first intervention, preventing another accident before it could happen. Then another, and another. A trail of rescued women and exposed abusers across the country. The network found me, he explained. Other survivors, advocates, people who'd lost loved ones to men who thought their money made them gods. We started working together, sharing information, watching for signs. Sarah remembered his appearance at her wedding. How did you know about Marcus? Amanda Robertson reached out. She recognized the patterns in your relationship, the isolation, the control, the escalating violence. When she heard about the wedding, the final article in Jackson's collection was fresh, barely a week old. Wedding day violence exposes pattern of abuse. Sarah's own story, but this time with truth replacing carefully constructed lies. You're not just a drifter. Are you? Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. Jackson finally smiled, though it held more sorrow than joy. I drift where I'm needed, where the network spots another Rebecca waiting to happen. Inside the courthouse, the bailiff called for proceedings to resume. Sarah stood, but Jackson remained seated, still holding his sister's photograph. I couldn't save her, he said quietly, but because of her, because of what those men did to her, others have a chance. You had a chance. Sarah touched the newspaper clipping gently. She'd be proud of you. She'd be proud of you, Jackson corrected. Standing up, fighting back, helping others find their voice. That's how we honor them. That's how we change things. As they walked back to the courtroom, Sarah noticed more details about Jackson. The military bearing beneath his casual clothes. The tactical awareness that had positioned him perfectly at her wedding. The way he carried himself like a man with purpose, rather than just a drifter. Will you stay? She asked. After the trial, Jackson glanced at his phone, where new alerts from the network awaited. More women in danger, more privileged men who needed to be stopped. Until it's finished, he promised. Until Marcus and his father can't hurt anyone else. Then he touched his sister's picture one last time before tucking it away. Then there are others who need help. The courthouse doors opened, revealing the crowd waiting inside. Marcus's glare found them. Immediately, but Sarah stood straighter. She understood now. She wasn't just fighting for herself, but for Rebecca Cole, for Amanda Robertson, for every woman silenced by wealth and power. Jackson took his usual place at the back of the courtroom, watchful and ready. The old newspaper clipping rested over his heart, a reminder that sometimes justice needed more than just the law. Sometimes it needed people willing to stand in the gap to protect those the system had failed. The trial resumed, but Sarah saw everything differently now. She wasn't just a survivor telling her story. She was part of something larger, a network of resistance against men who thought their power made them untouchable. A movement that had started with one woman's death and would continue until no more Rebeccas were lost to men like Marcus Davidson. The courtroom screen flickered to life, displaying grainy security footage from the Davidson estate's garage. The timestamp showed 3 months before the wedding. Marcus's expensive car pulled in, parking at an odd angle. The audio crackled, with distant voices. "Exhibit 47, Special Prosecutor Chen announced. Security footage from March 15th. Marcus shifted in his chair as his own voice filled the courtroom. "Who the hell do you think you are, talking to other attorneys without my permission?" The footage showed Sarah backing away, arms raised defensively. "It was a work meeting, Marcus, that's all." The sound of his hand striking her face made several jurors flinch, but it was Marcus's laugh afterward that caused the most reaction. Cold, controlled, almost pleased. "Everything I do is for your own good," his recorded voice said. "You need to learn." More footage followed. The Davidson Foundation's lobby, where Marcus cornered a young intern. The country club's parking lot, where he grabbed Amanda Robertson's arm hard enough to leave bruises. Each clip showed the same pattern, violence followed by calm rationalization, as if hurting women was the most natural thing in the world. "Your Honor," Marcus's attorney protested, "this footage was obtained illegally by the defendant's own security system," Chen countered, "which he used to record and review his attacks, to perfect his technique." The footage continued, relentless in its truth. Marcus in his office, threatening an employee who'd witnessed him assaulting Sarah. Richard Davidson appearing afterward, writing a check to ensure silence. The system of abuse and cover-up exposed in stark black and white. Marcus's composure began to crack. His jaw clenched, hands gripping the defense table hard enough to whiten his knuckles. When footage of his father coaching him on how to discipline Sarah appeared, he exploded. "You stupid bitch!" He lunged toward Sarah, his mask of civility completely gone. "I'll show you what happens when—" Bailiffs restrained him as the jury watched in shock. But the cameras kept rolling, showing years of calculated violence. Marcus dragging Sarah by her hair in the Davidson mansion's hallway. Marcus methodically explaining to Amanda why she deserved her injuries. Marcus laughing with Judge Harrison about another buried complaint. "Stop the footage," Marcus's attorney pleaded. Your client is showing his true nature." Chen's voice cut through the chaos. "Just like these tapes show who he really is." Sarah watched calmly as Marcus fought against the bailiffs. The security footage had captured everything she'd lived through, but seeing it exposed to the world felt like finally lancing a festering wound. More survivors came forward during the lunch recess, carrying their own videos, their own evidence. The Davidson family's carefully maintained facade crumbled under the weight of undeniable truth. "I'll destroy you," Marcus shouted as he was led away. "I own this town. I own you." But his words only reinforced what the footage had revealed. A man drunk on power, believing wealth and influence, gave him the right to abuse. His outburst would join the security tapes as evidence of his true character. Richard Davidson fled the courtroom, pursued by reporters asking about his role in enabling his son's violence. The powerful men who'd protected Marcus suddenly couldn't distance themselves fast enough. "It's all there," Jenny whispered, holding Sarah's hand. "Everything he did, everything they covered up." The security footage continued its damning testimony. Years of systematic abuse, caught by cameras Marcus had installed to maintain control, now becoming instruments of his downfall. Sarah touched her wrist where Marcus had grabbed her in that first garage video. He never thought anyone would see these. He recorded them because he was proud of what he did. Jackson Cole watched from his usual spot, recognizing the familiar pattern of privileged men who documented their own crimes, believing they were untouchable. But cameras didn't lie. and Marcus Davidson's true face was now exposed for all to see. The final clip showed Marcus rehearsing his wedding vows, laughing as he practiced looking sincere. "Till death do us part," he smirked to his reflection. "Or until she learns her place." The screen went dark, but the damage was done. Marcus Davidson had revealed himself more completely than any testimony could have managed. His rage, his calculation, his absolute belief in his right to abuse, all captured and preserved by his own cameras. The truth, like justice, had finally found its way into the light. The jury's verdict lay face down on crisp legal paper, waiting to be read. 3 days of deliberation had stretched the courthouse's tension to breaking point. Now, as the forewoman stood, Sarah could see her hands trembling slightly as she held the document. "In the matter of the state versus Marcus Davidson," Judge Martinez began, "has the jury reached a verdict?" "We have, Your Honor." The courtroom fell silent. Sarah felt Jenny's hand tighten around hers. Behind them, survivors filled every seat, each carrying their own hopes for justice. Jackson Cole stood at his usual post, watching Marcus for any sign of violence. "On the count of aggravated assault in the first degree, how do you find?" The forewoman's voice rang clear, "Guilty." Marcus's face darkened, but the verdicts continued. "On the count of domestic battery with intent to cause grievous bodily harm, guilty. On the count of witness intimidation, guilty." Each guilty verdict felt like another chain breaking, another wound healing. The written document passed from juror to judge contained not just legal judgments, but validation of every survivor's truth. On the various counts of conspiracy to obstruct justice, guilty on all counts. Marcus lunged forward, but bailiffs were ready. "You can't do this to me. Do you know who I am?" His outburst only reinforced the jury's decision. The verdict sheet listed 15 total charges. Systematic abuse finally meeting systematic justice. "The defendant will be remanded into custody pending sentencing," Judge Martinez declared. "Bail is revoked." As Marcus was led away, still shouting threats, Sarah noticed details she'd missed before. The forewoman's long sleeves in summer heat. The way another juror touched her wrist when domestic violence was mentioned. They'd understood because they'd lived it too. Richard Davidson stormed out, pursued by federal agents with warrant papers. The verdict had opened doors for other investigations. Financial crimes, witness tampering, years of corruption exposed. "The jury has included a written statement," Judge Martinez announced, lifting a second page. Sarah held her breath as the judge read, "We, the jury, wish to acknowledge the courage of Sarah Reynolds and all survivors who testified. Your truth has exposed not just one man's crimes, but a system that protected abusers at the expense of victims. Our verdict today is for every woman who was told her voice didn't matter, her pain didn't count, her abuser was too powerful to touch." Tears flowed freely in the gallery. Amanda Robertson sobbed into her sister's shoulder. The young intern Marcus had targeted hugged her mother. Each survivor heard their own vindication in those words. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "we recommend the maximum sentence on all counts to run consecutively rather than concurrently. The mathematics of justice, 25 years minimum. No possibility of early release. No more women would suffer at Marcus Davidson's hands." Special Prosecutor Chen gathered her papers, pausing to squeeze Sarah's shoulder. The verdict documents would become public record, proof that wealth and power couldn't buy immunity forever. Outside the courthouse, reporters thrust microphones at Sarah, but she directed them to other survivors, ensuring every voice was heard. This victory belonged to all of them. "Ms. Reynolds," one reporter called, "any comment on the verdict?" Sarah looked at the crowd of survivors surrounding her, at Jenny's proud smile, at Jackson's quiet nod of approval. She thought of her torn wedding dress, now a piece of evidence that had helped expose decades of abuse. "Justice isn't just a verdict," she said. "It's breaking silence. It's standing together. It's saying no more to men who think power gives them the right to hurt women. The verdict papers would be filed away in court records, but their impact would ripple outward. Other women were already coming forward, inspired to fight their own Marcus Davidsons. Jenny hugged her fiercely. "It's really over." "No," Sarah smiled, watching more survivors unite, share stories, find strength in each other. "It's just beginning." The verdict had done more than convict one man. It had shattered the illusion of invulnerability that men like Marcus Davidson had hidden behind for generations. The document's words would echo in other courtrooms, other cases, other moments of truth and justice. Sarah touched the crisp paper that had helped set her free. Sometimes healing began with two simple words, written in clear black ink. "We find..." Minutes of Mill Creek Emergency Town Hall meeting addressing domestic violence in our community, the document header read. Sarah sat in the front row of the packed assembly room, watching the town clerk's pen scratch across paper, recording "History in the Making." Mayor Helen Chen, no relation to the special prosecutor, stood at the podium, her usual political polish replaced by genuine concern. "We're here tonight because we failed. As a community, as leaders, as human beings, we failed to protect our own." The meeting minutes grew, capturing voice after voice. My daughter worked at the Davidson Foundation. When she tried to report Marcus's behavior, the police laughed her out of the station. Judge Harrison dismissed my restraining order, said I was overreacting. The hospital kept losing my records every time my husband's family made a donation. Each testimony was recorded, each system failure documented. No more buried complaints, no more looking away. Amanda Robertson approached the microphone. "We need more than just words. We need action." The clerk's pen raced across the page, recording the proposed changes: mandatory domestic violence training for all law enforcement, independent oversight committee for abuse complaints, emergency housing fund for survivors, reform of restraining order procedures, new protocols for medical documentation of abuse. Sarah watched the list grow. Each item represented a crack in the system that had protected Marcus, now being sealed with purpose and determination. The Davidson family's assets have been frozen pending federal investigation, Mayor Chen announced. Their foundation's buildings will be converted into a women's shelter and legal aid center. More proposals filled the minutes. Education programs in schools about healthy relationships, support groups for survivors, training for medical professionals to recognize abuse, public awareness campaigns, partnership with Jackson's network of survivor advocates. Jenny stood to address the crowd. Change has to start with belief, believing survivors, believing that no one is above the law. The clerk recorded how the room erupted in applause, how other survivors stood in solidarity, how even former Davidson allies now pledged support for reform. Jackson Cole watched from his usual position near the exit. The meeting minutes would become a blueprint for other communities, other towns, where wealth and power had created untouchable abusers. "We'd like to announce the formation of the Mill Creek Survivor Support Network," Sarah said when it was her turn. "A coalition of survivors, advocates and allies working to ensure this never happens again." The minutes captured the details: 24/7 crisis hotline, legal advocacy program, emergency response team, counseling services, job training and placement assistance. More survivors came forward, offering skills, resources, solidarity. The clerk's handwriting grew cramped as she tried to record every offer of help, every pledge of support. "This isn't just about domestic violence," a former Davidson employee testified. "It's about power, about who has it and how they use it, against those who don't." The meeting minutes reflected the shift in Mill Creek's power structure. New faces replaced the old guard. Survivors and advocates took positions on oversight committees. The wall of silence crumbled brick by brick. "We can't change the past," Mayor Chen concluded, "but we can damn well change the future." The final pages of minutes recorded the concrete steps: budget allocations, policy changes, implementation timelines, real change, not just promises. Sarah reviewed the document afterward, seeing their pain transformed into purpose, their trauma into transformation. The minutes would be filed in city records, proof that Mill Creek had faced its failures and chosen to change. Outside the town hall, survivors gathered in groups, exchanging numbers, sharing resources. The network that had started in whispers was now speaking out loud. "Will it last?" Jenny asked, watching the impromptu community forming. Sarah held up the meeting minutes, pages filled with commitment and action. "It has to. We'll make it last." Jackson checked his phone. More alerts from other towns, other women needing help. But now he could point them to Mill Creek, show them what was possible when survivors united and communities chose change. The clerk's final notation captured Sarah's closing words. "Today, we stop being victims. We become advocates, warriors, champions for change. Today, we reclaim not just our voices, but our power." The meeting minutes would be copied, shared, studied by other towns facing their own Marcus Davidsons. Mill Creek's transformation from a place of silence to a beacon of resistance, documented in neat lines of black ink on white paper. Proof that change was possible, that justice could grow from pain, that survivors could become heroes of their own stories. Sarah's journal lay open on her new desk at the Mill Creek Survivor Advocacy Center, formerly the Davidson Foundation's main office. Her neat handwriting filled pages that tracked not just her healing, but her transformation. 6 months since. The verdict. "Sometimes I still wake up reaching for the watch I used to hide my bruises, but then I remember I'm free. We're all free." The morning sun streamed through windows, once blocked by Marcus's heavy drapes. Sarah had redecorated the space in warm colors, creating an environment of healing rather than intimidation. "Today, I helped another woman leave," she wrote. "Like me, she thought she was alone. Like me, she believed she deserved the pain. Together, we packed her bags while her husband was at work. Jackson's network had a safe house ready. Watching her walk into her new life, I saw myself on my wedding day, but this time the story had a different ending. Her journal documented each victory, each step forward. First domestic violence case, one in court support group, expanding to neighboring towns, new legislation drafted for survivor protection, partnership with statewide advocacy networks. Speaking. Engagements sharing Mill Creek's transformation. Jenny says I smile more. One entry read, "She's right. The nightmares are less frequent now. When I look in the mirror, I see strength where he tried to create weakness. My voice, once silenced, carries across courtrooms and conference halls. Other survivors say it gives them courage, but they're the ones who inspire me." Each page showed healing wasn't linear. Some days brought triggers, setbacks, moments of fear. But Sarah documented those too, turning pain into purpose. Saw Marcus's father at the grocery store. My hands shook, but I didn't hide. Looked him straight in the eye as he shuffled past, a disgraced man heading to his own trial. Found myself pitying him. What a small, pathetic world he and Marcus lived in, where power meant permission to hurt. The journal's margins filled with names. Women helped, cases won, lives transformed. Amanda Robertson had become her partner in the Advocacy Center, turning her own trauma into a source of strength for others. Received word that Marcus's appeals were denied, she wrote. He'll serve his full sentence, but the real victory isn't in his punishment. It's in how many women now know they don't have to accept abuse from men like him. Professional accomplishments mingled with personal healing. Reopened her law practice, focusing on survivor advocacy, created scholarship fund for survivors seeking education, developed training programs for law enforcement, built coalition with other advocacy groups. Started writing a book about breaking the cycle of abuse. Mom asked if I'm dating again, one entry mused. Told her I'm learning to love myself first. Though I admit there's something compelling about the quiet strength of certain people who've supported this journey. The journal tracked her growing national platform. Other towns sought her advice on reforming their response to domestic violence. Her story appeared in magazines, inspired documentaries, sparked movements. "Strange to think it started with a wedding that never was," she wrote. "How that moment of violence became a catalyst for so much positive change. Every woman who leaves her abuser, every survivor who reclaims their power, every community that chooses to stop looking away. We're all part of something bigger now." Recent entries showed new confidence. Testified before the state legislature today, wasn't afraid. "These men in expensive suits are nothing like Marcus anymore. I see through their power plays, their attempts at intimidation. My voice doesn't shake when I speak truth to power." The latest entry captured her ongoing evolution. "A year ago, I thought I was walking toward a perfect life as Marcus Davidson's wife. Instead, I found something better, purpose, real strength, a community of survivors becoming warriors. We're changing laws, changing minds, changing lives. And I'm changing too, not into someone's wife, but into myself. Whole, strong, free." Sarah closed the journal, touching its worn cover. Unlike Marcus's records of abuse, these pages documented healing, hope, and transformation. They told the story not just of one woman's escape, but of a community's awakening. On her desk, a stack of case files waited, more women seeking help, more battles to fight. But now she had an army of survivors beside her, each one adding their voice to the chorus saying, "No more to abuse." The journal's final line remained unfinished, like the journey it documented. "This isn't the end of the story. It's just the beginning of..." Sarah picked up her pen, ready to write the next chapter, not just in her journal, but in the ongoing story of survival, justice, and change. "Dear Jackson, by the time you read this letter, you'll be gone, off to help another survivor, to stand in another gap where the system fails. I understand why you can't stay. There are too many Marcus Davidsons in the world, too many women, like I was, thinking they're alone. I want you to know what your intervention meant, not just stopping Marcus at the wedding, though that moment saved my life. It's what you showed me, showed all of us, about courage, about standing up when others look away." The letter lay on Jackson's motel bed next to his worn leather journal. Through the window, dawn painted Mill Creek in new colors, a town transformed in the year since a wedding day turned into a revolution. "You fought for your sister's memory by fighting for us. Rebecca would be proud of the ripples you've created. Every woman who finds shelter in our new advocacy center, every survivor who reclaims their voice, carries a piece of her legacy, and yours." Jackson folded the letter carefully, adding it to his journal alongside other testaments, to lives changed. His phone buzzed with alerts from the network. Another wealthy abuser, another woman in danger, another town bound by silence. "I know why you have to go, but I want you to understand what you're leaving behind. A community that finally faces truth instead of hiding it. A justice system being reformed from within, a network of survivors becoming advocates, a model for other towns to follow hope. Where there was only fear before, Sarah's words captured the transformation he'd witnessed. The Davidson estate converted to a shelter, Judge Harrison cooperating with federal investigators, Richard Davidson's empire crumbling as more corruption came to light. You taught me that sometimes protection comes from unexpected places. That, one person willing to stand up, can give others courage to do the same. The gun you drew that day wasn't just aimed at Marcus. It was aimed at the whole system of silence and privilege that protected men like him. Through his motel window, Jackson watched survivors arrive for their morning support group at the advocacy center. Women who'd once hidden in shadows now walked tall, helping others find their strength. The network you connected us to grows stronger every day. We're learning to be our own heroes, to fight not just for ourselves, but for every woman still trapped, still silent, still afraid. Your sister's story lives on in each life we help save. He checked his route to the next town, where another powerful man thought wealth meant immunity, where another woman waited for someone to finally say, "Enough. I won't ask you to stay, though part of me wishes you would. You have your mission just as I've found mine, but know that you'll always have a home here, always have family among the survivors you've helped create." His bag was packed light, just the journal, some clothes, his revolver. But Sarah's letter would travel with him, reminder of why he'd chosen this path after Rebecca's death. The Advocacy Center stands where Marcus once ruled. The shelter bears your sister's name. The support network stretches across state lines. You helped us build something lasting, something that will keep growing long after you've gone. Outside, Mill Creek stirred to life. Sarah's car already parked at the center, early as always. Amanda's too, and others who'd found their voice in the past year. So this isn't goodbye, not really. It's thank you for showing us our strength, for proving that justice is possible, for turning one moment of intervention into a movement that can't be stopped. Jackson tucked the letter into his journal, between Rebecca's photograph and the article about Sarah's wedding. Different chapters of the same story: survival, justice, transformation. Be safe in your travels. Keep fighting the good fight. And remember that whenever you need rest or hope or family, you'll find it here among the warriors you helped create. With gratitude and love, Sarah, his phone buzzed again. Another crisis, another town, another chance to help change the ending of the story. Jackson shouldered his bag, leaving behind a changed Mill Creek for a place that still needed change. Sarah watched from the Advocacy Center window as his truck pulled away. The letter had said what words spoken aloud couldn't fully express, how one person's courage could spark a revolution of hope. In his rearview mirror, Jackson saw the sun rising over Mill Creek. The next town waited in darkness, but he carried with him proof that light could overcome any shadow. Sarah's letter, like Rebecca's memory, would remind him why the journey must continue. The work wasn't finished. It never would be, as long as power could corrupt and silence could shield abuse. But now he traveled with the strength of every survivor. Behind him, their voices joining his sisters to say, "No more." Dear Jackson, by the time you read this letter, you'll be gone, off to help another survivor, to stand in another gap where the system fails. I understand why you can't stay. There are too many Marcus Davidsons in the world, too many women, like I was, thinking they're alone. I want you to know what your intervention meant, not just stopping Marcus at the wedding, though that moment saved my life. It's what you showed me, showed all of us, about courage, about standing up when others look away. The letter lay on Jackson's motel bed, next to his worn leather journal. Through the window, dawn painted Mill Creek in new colors. A town, transformed in the year since a wedding day turned into a revolution. You fought for your sister's memory by fighting for us. Rebecca would be proud of the ripples you've created. Every woman who finds shelter in our new advocacy center, every survivor who reclaims their voice, carries a piece of her legacy and yours. Jackson folded the letter carefully, adding it to his journal alongside other testaments to lives changed. His phone buzzed with alerts from the network. Another wealthy abuser, another woman in danger, another town bound by silence. I know why you have to go, but I want you to understand what you're leaving behind. A community that finally faces truth instead of hiding it. A justice system being reformed from within, a network of survivors becoming advocates, a model for other towns to follow hope, where there was only fear before Sarah's words captured the transformation he'd witnessed. The Davidson estate converted to a shelter. Judge Harrison cooperating with federal investigators. Richard Davidson's empire crumbling as more corruption came to light. You taught me that sometimes protection comes from unexpected places. That one person willing to stand up can give others courage to do the same. The gun you drew that day wasn't just aimed at Marcus. It was aimed at the whole system of silence and privilege that protected men like him. Through his motel window, Jackson Watch survivors arrive for their morning support group at the advocacy center. Women who'd once hidden in shadows now walked tall, helping others find their strength. The network you connected us to grows stronger every day. We're learning to be our own heroes, to fight not just for ourselves, but for every woman still trapped, still silent, still afraid. Your sister's story lives on in each life we help save. He checked his route to the next town, where another powerful man thought wealth meant immunity, where another woman waited for someone to finally say, "Enough. I won't ask you to stay, though part of me wishes you would. You have your mission, just as I've found mine, but know that you'll always have a home here, always have family among the survivors you've helped create." His bag was packed light, just the journal, some clothes, his revolver. But Sarah's letter would travel with him, reminder of why he'd chosen this path after Rebecca's death. The advocacy center stands where Marcus once ruled. The shelter bears your sister's name. The support network stretches across state lines. You helped us build something lasting, something that will keep growing long after you've gone. Outside, Mill Creek stirred to life. Sarah's car already parked at the center, early as always. Amanda's too, and others who'd found their voice in the past year. So this isn't goodbye, not really. It's thank you, for showing us our strength, for proving that justice is possible, for turning one moment of intervention into a movement that can't be stopped. Jackson tucked the letter into his journal, between Rebecca's photograph and the article about Sarah's wedding. Different chapters of the same story: survival, justice, transformation. Be safe in your travels. Keep fighting the good fight. And remember that whenever you need rest or hope or family, you'll find it here among the warriors you helped create. With gratitude and love, Sarah. His phone buzzed again. Another crisis, another town, another chance to help change the ending of the story. Jackson shouldered his bag, leaving behind a changed Mill Creek for a place that still needed change. Sarah watched from the advocacy center window as his truck pulled away. The letter had said what words spoken aloud couldn't fully express, how one person's courage could spark a revolution of hope. In his rearview mirror, Jackson saw the sun rising over Mill Creek. The next town waited in darkness, but he carried with him proof that light could overcome any shadow. Sarah's letter, like Rebecca's memory, would remind him why the journey must continue. The work wasn't finished. It never would be, as long as power could corrupt and silence could shield abuse. But now he traveled with the strength of every survivor. Behind him, their voices joining his sisters to say, "No more."